1999 The Podcast is a production of the Cage Club Podcast Network. For more podcasts on movies, comics, and all things pop culture, head to cageclub.me. To contact us with questions, comments, or just to say hi, send us an email at 1999@cageclub.me. You can find me on Twitter at probablyrealjb and Joey at Soulpot. And you can follow the show on Twitter at 1999 The Podcast. To support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. The show is written, produced, and edited by us. Welcome to 1999 The Podcast. I am John Brooks.
And I am Joey Lewandowski. It is winter, and this is a winter movie.
Oh, it is a winter movie. That's true. I hadn't really thought about that angle. It sort of takes place in a time and place in my mind where it's kind of always winter. So I guess I never really thought too much about the winter nature.
Winterfell? This is Game of Thrones, right? Is that what we're talking about? Speaking of Game of Thrones, I know we'll talk about this movie like in the actual episode, but like while watching this movie, the only thing I could think is like, this has everything John likes about movies. Character actors, more character actors, more character actors, being set in the year 1999.
Yep.
End of list.
Yep. That's when it's set.
Not when it's set, but when it came out, I guess, right?
I don't think the Spanish-American War was in 1999. It is when it came out. You are correct. So, Joey, you have some an exciting new development today, which is that America's favorite segment, the intro to this podcast.
Yeah.
Usually, it's just the two of us.
Usually, sometimes we let Brian Silliman in here for no reason other than he just shows up.
That's true.
Was he early or was he late? I don't remember. Or
he was both early and late.
Yeah. And then he just appeared and we're like, all right, I guess we're rolling with this.
Yeah. And we had Juhi on as sort of because we didn't.
But that was a solid segment. Yeah. Just no breakup.
But the first time that we've had someone here for the entire time, and we our old friend from one of our least favorite movies that we've talked about.
My least favorite. I think my bottom.
The least favorite. Probably mine too. It is Logan. Hello, Logan. How are you?
Hello. I'm glad that I'm your favorite, even after the absurdity of Boys Don't Cry.
Well, it's not your fault that movie's terrible. Or is it?
The ratio of guest to movie on that episode is incredibly disparate. So I think you get a lot of extra points because it's a movie that we hated, but we enjoyed talking to you. So you stand out. Anyway, welcome to the intro. It's uncharted territory for most of our guests.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Is it ironic that I am currently starving right now?
Would we call that ironic? It depends on how you decide to assuage your hunger. I think we've been beating around the bush about this one, the movie of the day. And Logan, we invited you because we do have guests for the main part of the episode, but I wanted to talk to you before we talk to them because you named two movies as your favorites of 1999. One of them was The Talented Mr. Ripley, which we just did, and the other one is the one we're going to do today, and I want to get your thoughts. So today's movie was released on March the 19th and stars Guy Pearce, Robert Gary Oldman wasn't available, Carlisle, Jeffrey Jones, Jeremy Davies, Stephen Spinella, Neil McDonough's Eyes, David Arquette, and John Spencer, written by Ted Griffin with a score by Michael Nyman and my personal savior, Damon Albarn. By the way, this is not the only weird supernatural thriller scored by a famous 90s alt-rock hero of this year, so keep a pin in that. And directed by the director of other one-word titled movies like Priest, Face, and Care, the late Antonia Bird. We are talking today about Ravenous.
Yeah.
So, Logan.
Yes.
What's Ravenous about?
I'm so glad he's here that I don't have to do this. Logan, my least favorite part of this podcast is being put on the spot. Even though I know it's my, almost literally my one job is to recap the movies, I still hate doing it. And I'm like, ooh, maybe I don't have to do it. And I don't have to do it.
You lucky bastard. So, Ravenous is it's the 19th century. It is a military outpost where these group of they're not all soldiers, but I guess like this ragtag team of outcasts um, find themselves at the heart of this like cannibalistic, not conspiracy, but this insane cannibal sets his sights on this group. Antics ensue.
I think in my plot summary of it, I also had the phrase "ragtag bunch of misfits." So I'm glad that was
And
actually.
I've seen some people call the antagonist like a vampire sort of film. I've seen it like categorized as
Yes.
that, which I find interesting.
There are obvious vampire allusions here. Like, I think Roger Ebert in his review talked about how like it's not really a cannibal movie, it's a vampire movie, but it's like a vampirism via cannibalism movie. And anyway, it's one of the many sort of weird and interesting and somewhat experimental and sort of all over the place elements of this very interesting movie. Let's talk about how it was received. It is the 180th highest grossing film of the year.
Not great. Not great.
Ravenous never finished higher than 18th at the domestic box office, earning just over $2 million on a $12 million budget. It was never released theatrically outside of North America. The film has just a 51% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 46 Metacritic rating. Often those scores reflect a lukewarm reception from critics, but in the case of Ravenous, they instead reflect something much more interesting, opinions that are all over the place, sometimes within the very same review. The movie was praised by Kevin Thomas in the Los Angeles Times and Roger Ebert in the Chicago Sun-Times, and ripped apart by Stephen Hunter of the Washington Post, Peter Rayner in Vulture, and Stephen Thompson of AV Club, who wrote, quote, "Ravenous will doubtlessly find some sort of cult following, but that cult will be following a lousy, ill-conceived movie."
Ooh.
Every critic seems to agree on one thing. The movie shifts tones so often and dramatically that it's hard to actually pin it to any one genre. They don't agree on whether this makes it better or worse, however. Maitland McDonough in TV Guide wrote, for instance, that Ravenous...
Any relation to Neil McDonough?
I do not believe so. That Ravenous is... Yes, that my brother Neil's movie, Ravenous...
You never know, man.
You don't know. Is an eccentric historical horror tale whose blackly comic tone wavers distractingly. Interesting way to say it. In a positive review for Nerdist, Kyle Anderson wrote, quote, "It's such an odd and compelling mixture of horror and subtle comedy with some really weird music cues throughout to put the audience in a state of unease. Perfect for someone losing their mind from eating people." Perhaps this is all best encapsulated by two reviews that come out somewhere in the middle. Slate's David Edelstein, whose Metacritic score for the film is 40, wrote, quote, "I'd like to recommend it, but it's too silly. On the plus side, it's ravishingly well directed by Antonia Bird." And Noel Murray in Dissolve, with a Metacritic score of 50, who wrote, quote, "Ravenous is misbegotten in multiple ways. It isn't scary enough to be an effective horror movie or funny enough to be much of a comedy, but say this for Ravenous, it isn't generic." I have my own thoughts, but Logan, I know that you love this movie, so you are here to first tell us why.
Sorry, that critic quote about it not being funny, just like, what movie did you watch?
It's pretty funny. Sometimes.
This movie is just so, like, as those reviews said, like, tonally inconsistent and just, like, strange, but it's so, I guess, passionate and detailed and smart in its writing and its performances that, like, I watched this film 5 times last year. I cannot get enough of it. It's so unique, and I've never seen anything like it before or like since then. It's just like, it's such a unique film to just like hold on a pedestal and like dissect.
Did you discover it for the first time last year?
I did, yes. I was looking for specifically Western horror films, and this one came up, and I'm like, all right. And not for like the first third, I wasn't really with it. And then that first tonal shift happens when, I don't know if we're referring to him as Ives or Calhoun, but when Robert Carlyle
Spoiler alert, yeah.
Spoilers. When he first reveals the cannibalism and the music takes on this like Beverly Hillbillies, like plunky little banjo, and it just becomes a comedy.
Yeah.
It had my heart, and I was with it the whole rest of the way. Like, oh my God.
You've got two composers, which I think is part of the way that this movie kind of leans into its schizophrenia. With Michael Nyman, who is he's the composer of The Piano, which sold like 1 million copies as a soundtrack. I mean, probably more than that. A renowned film composer, and Damon Albarn, this is the only film he's ever scored. So this was a brand new, uncharted territory thing for him. It reminds me a lot of the score to There Will Be Blood, by Johnny Greenwood.
Please
Thank you.
have some respect.
Thank you,
Thank
Joey.
you so
I know you'd pull that one out because you're a diehard Radiohead fan. In terms of sort of the aesthetic, it sort of reminds me of that. But yeah, the way that this movie seems to have two different scores that come in and reset the tone over and over again, I think is sort of, it's almost like the movie knows that it's a bunch of different movies at the same time and can't settle on a single genre. And that's kind of, I think, part of its charm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I have my little side interest in like queer horror films.
Yeah.
This is like not the midpoint, but this is a post Interview with the Vampire film, pre-Hannibal film. And Robert Carlyle is such an interesting blend of Lestat and like a precursor to Mads Mikkelsen's Hannibal. Just like the inherent absurdity of the gay cannibal really feels like it reaches a fever pitch here.
Yeah. So like, okay. One of the things that, as I've been reading, and also one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, is a lot of different sort of angles that this movie is viewed from. There's a kind of, we'll talk more about this in the main part of the episode, but there's a kind of the overt metaphor of Manifest Destiny and the idea of imperialism as kind of a cannibalism. But I've read some of the like the queer horror angles. And what's your read on it? Like, what does it have to say in that regard? I mean, it's not as overt as like Interview with the Vampire is, but how does it function sort of in that genre?
It's really interesting. Like, this was the film that made me really look at like the, not amount of films, but like the various films that deal with this, I guess, queer consumption of flesh. Like there's Interview with the Vampire, there's Jennifer's Body. I categorized Bones and All, which came out this last year, as like into that category. And there's always this weird, I guess, dynamic between the characters of like the more flamboyant one who's really into the consumption and the more stoic, standoffish, no, I don't want to be this one. And that's present in Jennifer's Body, Interview with the Vampire. And it's like present here where there's like one guy who's really like, Robert Carlyle is so out there and so happy to be a cannibal. He's virile now. He's loving this shit. And Guy Pearce is like, I would literally rather die the way I die than consume with you. And I don't know if this movie is like intentionally homophobic or gay, like pro-gay, or like the movie clearly I don't think was thinking about that, but there's just such an interesting dynamic in the way that these two characters interact off each other, and the way I guess that it like ultimately does not matter.
That's interesting. Antonia Bird, who directed it, I mean, I think her other major, like, best known movie is Priest, which is about a gay priest.
Which is on my watch list because of this movie. I'm very interested to see that one.
Yeah, I've never heard of anything else she's done. Like I thought Priest was, I think maybe Anthony Hopkins was is that The Priest? There was like a bad horror movie from like a decade ago, I think, that was called The Priest or something, which I also haven't seen. So that doesn't really help here, but we'll talk about, I want to let Logan talk because he won't be on the main episode. I'll get my thoughts out then, but like, I did not know this was directed by a woman the first time I saw it. And so I was surprised this time because I'm like looking at, because the listing of the credits and like remembering who's in it's like dude name, woman. I don't know who she plays. Dude name. I'm like, this is such a very like masculine, aggro-ish kind of just like lots of testosterone. And then it's directed by a woman. Like, I think it's a very fascinating dynamic. I'm curious what else she's done. I just don't know the rest of her work. I guess it's mostly British, right? Like, I guess this maybe Ravenous is like kind of like maybe the only real crossover thing that she's done, possibly.
Yeah, and originally it was not even her film. So she was a replacement director on this film for Raja Gosnell, who directed the live-action Scooby-Doo films.
Oh, no. Oh my god!
Like the Sarah Michelle Gellar ones, like those ones.
The Matthew Lillard ones with
okay, yeah.
Yes. I'm reading off the IMDb here. The cast mutinied against him, feeling he was an unfit choice to helm the project.
Wow.
And it was Robert Carlyle, who had worked with Antonia Bird before on Priest, not The Priest. And he had her come in as like a friend who he had worked with before and who he trusted with like the content of this film, which I find incredibly fascinating.
I kind of wondered that because I knew that Robert Carlyle was in Priest. And I had also heard that she was not the original director. I didn't really know that story or the Scooby-Doo director. I also find it really interesting because one of the things that I think makes this movie work is that even though the movie doesn't know what it is most of the time, it seems like every single actor is completely on board with whatever it is.
God, yeah.
And there does seem to be a real kind of unity among this cast that gives it, I think, a lot of its like where it is successful is there, right?
Yeah, and I think even just like having a woman to like oversee, because without ruining your episode and going into too much, this is a film about men destroying each other in like every sense of like the term.
Yeah, real guy stuff.
Yeah, and there's basically no women in this movie, right? And like the only one that is, I don't think she ever talks.
She has one line, I think. Like when she pulls a knife, I think she says like maybe one thing.
Yeah.
She has lines earlier when Boyd goes into the tent to talk with her, but yeah, she like Boyd has very few lines.
Well, I think what's interesting about the movie, and we'll get into this in the episode, is that like a lot of characters are only around for like half the movie. You know what I mean? So like so it's kind of like Death Proof in that way where it's like, oh, this is like, not our main character. Okay, interesting. Okay, I thought this was going one way and it's going a different way, right? So the not having lines thing is not great, but like it's very bisected, I think, and there's some crossover obviously, but like there's not and this movie's not overly long as it is, and there's like sort of two distinct halves, right? So it's interesting how that all breaks down.
Well, one of them, who is a great actor but very problematic, as it turned out, who will show up again in another movie that we're going to cover eventually, Jeffrey Jones. You think he's not in it for long, and then turns out that's not the case. But yeah, Jeremy Davies dies real fast.
Yeah.
And it's like it's the weird thing of a movie like this where like pretty much everybody is going to die, and they can't all wait till the end, and so you're going to have good actors and good roles who are going to be dispatched early on. And I mean Jeremy Davies I think is the first of the ones who don't ever come back to be dispatched, and then like David Arquette is just kind of hanging around giggling and then dies for most of the movie. But Logan, one more thing I want to ask you before we wrap this side of it up. You've seen it 5 times in the last year, you said, is that?
Yes.
So I've seen this movie twice. I saw it the first time that I saw it, and I saw it when I watched it again this past week. And I've I'm not gonna say liked it, but like admired a lot of it both times. I don't have negative feelings about this movie, but I also don't feel the need to watch it again. I probably wouldn't have watched it a second time were it not for this episode. What have you found rewarding about multiple views? Like what becomes more apparent, or do you see like new angles to this with watching it 5 times?
I do, yeah. I think just because like there is such an obsession on my part with like gay horror and just like the way that cannibalism lends itself to that kind of metaphor, when I go back I like see a lot more of like the religious iconography, and there's like one shot that my friend is absolutely obsessed over when like Calhoun and Boyd are standing outside and behind them is like the American flag, and they're talking about all this stuff, and there's just like there's so much visual storytelling in this movie, I think, because like they are so specific and concise when they choose to have these characters speak, that like so much of this is like utilizing the medium. I'm like, we were so spoiled with the gay cannibal movies we were getting back then. I miss them.
So you would agree that it is a lot of different. There's a lot of different ideas, a lot of different balls in the air here. That it juggles, sort of, it switches moods, it switches genres, it switches ideas, like it's blinking, right?
Oh, yeah.
But do you think that's detrimental to the movie in the long run, or do you think it works sort of as, like, is it elevated in like the gay horror canon for you, or just the sort of like, allegory horror canon? Like, where does it fit?
I think just because like there's like 3 or 4, it feels like, main themes at all points just kind of like interwoven with each other. The movie never felt boring to me because every time they'd like switch off from one theme and go back to another, it's like, okay, now with the military guys, now we're in the woods and like survival, and just even just like I cannot believe Jeffrey Jones has like ruined like 2 different Western properties for me. But at the same time, you do get to watch him die twice in this. That is a little bit rewarding.
And he is like, and again, it's so problematic, but he's so fucking good in this movie. Like, this is
like, oh god, I hate him, but he plays a good role in this. I wish it were anybody else,
I know.
but for him being here, I will accept that. Like, I love what his character represents, I guess. Like, this conflicted man who's like, oh yeah, I'll go along with this, and then immediately is like, dude, you gotta kill me. I cannot be eating people.
Yeah. It's my favorite performance of his, which again is like, that's one of the reasons I have a kind of hard time watching it, because look it up, kids. I don't think we're gonna get too much.
Yeah, I looked it up on this while you guys were chatting, and yeah, not good. Not good.
Not
good.
There's a reason I bought my DVD secondhand on eBay.
Oh, there you go. All right, fair
I'm
enough.
not listening to residuals.
But Neil McDonough, unproblematic.
And he's great in another Western property, Justified, if you have 75 hours for that TV show.
All right, we are going to transition to the main part of the show in just a moment. Joey's going to introduce our guests in just a second, but before we do that, Logan, remind people where they can find you on the internet.
I am on Twitter at TransHorrors. I also have a TransHorror Patreon currently going, same URL, TransHorrors, and yeah, Instagram TransHorrors. I try and keep my handle ubiquitous now, and yeah, I guess if you are interested in the intersections of trans and queer horror, maybe look me up.
Cool. Thanks for joining us for this, and we are going to take a quick break and come back with our guests. We're going to talk about the folklore-ish element of this movie, among other things, with our guest today.
Before I get to that, I want to do one little bit of shameless self-promotion, because the most recent episode of Too Fast, Too Forever is The Iron Giant, a film which we will cover on this podcast eventually, but we covered over there for the Vin Diesel lap. So if you want to go check that out within the context of Fast and Furious, not 1999, but also 1999 in terms of like Vin's career, which is between Saving Private Ryan and his 3 big franchises, go check that out wherever you get podcasts. But back to the show at hand. Our guests today are the hosts of the podcast Least Haunted, Cody and Garth.
Thanks, Logan, and we'll be right back with Cody and Garth.
Thank you, Logan.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being with us. I want to talk briefly about your podcast, Least Haunted, which is, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a really interesting sort of take on something that there's quite a bit of saturation for on in the podcast world. You guys talk a lot about sort of paranormal, weirdy stuff, but from the perspective of the skeptical and sort of doubting, rational side of it, right? Which I think is a really interesting thing, while also not being dicks, and also like being very enthusiastic about the subject matter that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the thread we want to weave, because I wouldn't want to be like, oh, this is a bunch of skeptics, denouncing or poo-pooing really fun stories. So yeah, we want to have we have a positive tone, I think.
Yeah, we try to maintain that George Carlin tradition of only punching up ideas and power. and we kind of reserve that judgment against some of the people or things we talk about, except for charlatans and anyone who takes advantage of another person. Once that happens, they're fair game,
Oh, yeah.
and we will just drag them.
No, I think that's reasonable.
Is there anybody that you're waiting to ascend to power so you can take them down? Like someone that you
Ooh, that's a good
hate
question.
who's not powerful enough?
that would be not punching
Oh.
up yet. Oh, that's a good question. Gosh,
That is a good
I
question.
never thought about this.
It's that damn Sarah Polly.
No, nobody comes. Nobody comes to mind. I mean, I like making fun of people, but I mean, I don't know. I don't like. I'm not like just like waiting. Oh, once they get powerful enough, then we could. I can't think of anybody.
Yeah. Maybe there probably are people who they are powerful enough. I just don't know.
We've
about
never
them
heard
yet.
of them. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably the better answer.
If we had
There's
heard
no
of
one
them,
who
we
isn't-
would be punching up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, someone that I want to punch right now is Graham Hancock. And,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I always want to punch Graham Hancock, but ever since he's been more in the spotlight because of that fucking Netflix series.
Yeah. So I, for the record, I have a degree in anthropology and archaeology. And
Right.
so that is
Yes.
my background.
Unlike
yeah.
him.
So that's my background.
Who has a degree in nothing. Yeah.
And isn't there some kind of controversy? I don't want to do any libel here or slander, but I thought I saw a detail that like his son is one of the executives at Netflix, and that's how we got the show.
I didn't know that. I think I would not be surprised. I do know that he wrote an angry letter to Netflix today because Netflix has recategorized his show science fiction from documentary.
Nice.
Because I think they got tons of blowback. But anyway, we're gonna talk about Ravenous finally, a movie that. So for some context, this is a movie that was mentioned by our very first guest when we did our very first episode, Brian Raftery, who wrote a book about the movies of 1999. And towards the end of the episode, we were kind of talking about some of the lesser known movies of that year and some of the ones that have kind of a cult following. And he brought this one up as something that people have kind of revisited for a while. And I wanted to cover this from pretty early on when we started the podcast. I thought you guys would be interesting. Well, for two reasons. One, I think Cody, you were the one who tweeted about it.
Yeah.
I was like, no shit. We want to talk to somebody about this movie. But also because there's a real interesting kind of like folklore element to this as well that I thought you guys' vantage point would be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So
the tweet I made, because we're not on Twitter anymore. We've since left that, but back when we were there, the movie came up in an earlier one of our episodes. We were talking about indigenous shapeshifter mythologies with an indigenous expert, and the movie came up, and he was like, "Oh no, I love that movie, and I like watching the trailer because the trailer's hilarious. It's completely tone deaf.
The movie's hilarious.
Oh yeah, the movie is.
Go on.
But I mean, and it was right to. I guess it's kind of right to advertise it as a comedy, but the way they present the kind of comedy they presented it as in the trailer is all, wrong. But anyway, we start talking about that, and poor Garth has never seen the movie, so he is completely like lost in the conversation. And so then, I asked Twitter if I should force Garth to watch Ravenous, and that's how this all came about.
Well, okay, so that's a good way to start with the way that we usually start episodes, which is our experience with the first time watching the movie. So Garth, we kind of know where you fall on that. I'll get more detail as to exactly what that experience was like. Joey, I'm going to start with you though.
Yeah.
I know when you saw it at least one time a few weeks ago.
Yeah, like 6 years ago when we were supposed to record this episode originally, before the Great Floods.
Had you seen it before?
I saw it once before, so like 5 or 6 years ago. Actually, I could probably do the math. It was 2016, fall of 2016, probably. I had fellow hosts at the podcast network, Chris Podcast, last name redacted because he is a doctor Podcasts, and he programmed, because I would in October I would watch like a bunch of horror movies, and like every once in a while I'll try to do like 4 or 5 in a row in a day, and just like things I'd never seen before, and just like do like a bunch in a row. And I was like, hey, can you pick 4 or 5 that like you love that I haven't seen? And he picked like, 5. I was like, I've seen 2 of those. And like we eventually landed on 5 that I hadn't seen. And this was one of them. And it's so different, I think, tonally and stylistically and in many ways from like most horror movies that you watch, especially in Halloween time, like in October, that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I like this. Like, I don't know that I don't like it, but it's so weird that like, I don't know that I want like a snowy Western that's shot during the day when like I'm going to go into like literally any other horror movie. And so I was like, I like it. I don't love it. I don't know what to make of it. I'm going to set it aside. And then I watched it again for the second time, a couple weeks ago when we were going to watch this or record this. So like I've seen it twice. I liked it more. I still don't really know what to make of it. I think that it's definitely going to benefit from like seeing it again sort of more quickly than waiting 5 or 6 years in between or whatever. But I liked it more. It's a very weird, like if you're just watching, like, I want to watch horror movies with a capital HM, whatever, like it's weird. It's not what I would think of when I think horror, when I think tropes. I don't think almost anything from this.
No. There's a lot of tropes in this movie, but they're not like normal. They're sort of tropes from all over the place, which is really interesting and weird. Cody, you seem to have the longer history with this movie.
Yes. I saw this movie for the first time in 1999. So
get the fuck out. That's crazy.
I think at this time, let me do my math. I would have been 13. And I saw it as the in-flight movie that was shown during dinner on a transatlantic flight to England.
Do you think was it unedited? Was it the whole movie, or did they?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So it was like I had no idea what it was, and I was too worried about chicken or fish. Like what is it? What's in this thing? And then this movie's on, and so it like 13-year-old me did not know what to make of it completely, because I was like, I don't think I really thought of it as a horror movie. I thought of it as more of like a suspense, like thriller at 13. But since then I've watched it a few times. I had watched it a few times over the years. And then in preparation for this podcast, though, full disclosure, I have watched this movie 8 times.
Whoa. Wow.
Because the DVD has like 5 commentaries and they're all really good.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So I had to show it to Garth for his first time, and I had to watch it just once without any commentaries to like absorb that. So I am I don't know the right word, but like really hungry, something like really hungry to talk about this movie.
Famished.
Yes,
famished. The word.
To talk about the movie. This is one of the, so we have now 2 in a row that I did not see in 1989. Most of the movies that we've covered so far are movies that I saw in that year. This is one that I didn't. I'm not sure when I first saw it. It definitely was, I was still in college. So it would have been within a couple of years of this coming out. And I just remember, I remember like vibes. It's a vibes movie, right? I remember there was cannibalism and there was actors that I liked. And, Joey said in the intro that this movie has character actors, and that's my jam. And a lot of them that I love. And I just remember being like, I don't know. There was a lot of like really cool, stylish movies around that time, and this was kind of one of them. And this was like around the time that I saw like the Brotherhood of the Wolf, right? Like
that's another good one.
Yeah, and it sort of fits in that. It's sort of like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah,
and,
that is like, oh wow, I didn't even like think about that. But as soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, this is totally in that same genre,
which is not a genre, but like
it could be.
It is. It could be. But I liked it, and then I saw it again for this, and I still like, we alluded a little bit to this when we did our intro, but like, it's so all over the place and weird, but like in this very endearing and like
the thing I most wanted to say in the intro that I held back and I bit my tongue is that there's a full movie worth of plot in the first 45 minutes.
Yes.
And then it's like, oh, we have another hour. Okay.
Hmm.
What do we do now?
I see what you
Well,
mean.
20
yeah.
minutes of that is just Guy Pearce falling down a hill. So,
Yeah.
which goes on for a very long
I think
time.
that ranks up there as one of the greatest falling down a hill. It goes up there with like Black Sheep,
Yeah.
Chris Farley going to the hill, and then Hot Rod when he falls down the hill, and then
What about the
beginning
kid
of
in
Kung
Mac
Pao.
and Me? The
Mac
Mac
and
and
Me.
Me,
the Mac and Me
wheelchair kid.
Yeah.
falls.
Mhm.
And
All
then
time.
the baby
Yeah.
at the beginning of Kung Pao Enter the Fist, and then Guy Pearce. I think those are like the best prolonged shots of somebody just going down a hill for way too long.
No, I think one of the things that you said, Cody, is that like you're not really quite like, and Joey, you're alluding to this too, is like it's a horror movie, like I'm not really quite sure. I feel like if you just go in being like, I'm going to watch it today as a comedy, and if you watch it
Mhm.
as a comedy, you will get a comedy out of it. And then you're like, I'm going to watch it as a horror movie, and you'll get that out of it. And it's really, I mean, bizarre and messy and interesting, and
I feel like
I
I
don't
was
know, I kind of love
I
it.
was kind of primed for it to be a comedy just because I was watching it with
Yeah.
Cody and I had no idea what to expect. I like going into movies completely cold. I'd never heard of it. I'd never even seen the trailer. So I figured it was possibly kind of gory, but yeah, I found it delightful and really I guess I enjoyed it as a comedy. I would have a hard time seeing it
And,
another way, I think.
and Garth, notable vegetarian.
Yeah.
Right.
First scene, it's just like the bloodiest
Meat.
human meat that they're eating, and it's
Ugh.
like Civil War times, and it's like, oh boy. And I just looked over at Cody. I'm like, what is this?
One thing that I don't keenly aware of somehow in watching it this time was the wonderful work done by the Foley artist, because those chewing
Yes,
sounds and
yes.
like, oh,
Oh, it was very well done. And that's the thing. Like, it's kind of a funny, weird movie, but it is really beautifully put together. The
Oh, it's
cinematography
great.
and the soundtrack, and yeah, the Foley work,
yeah,
all of the audio was. I mean, I was in. I was riveted the whole time.
yes.
Even the parts that went on too long, I was like amazed that they went on too long. I don't know. I really just enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah, every time I rewatched it recently, I've discovered new things to just love about this movie.
Yeah.
And now
That's what Logan said.
it is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it's amazing. I don't know how much you guys talked about it in the intro. Did you just kind of do a plot synopsis, or did you go into the production at all?
We didn't really go into the production. We talked with our friend Logan, who covers like queer and trans horror,
Mhm.
and talked the sort of the queer angle of this, which
Hmm.
is kind of
Mhm.
interesting. But Logan
Hmm.
also said the same thing. Like Logan's seen it a whole bunch of times, and he was like, yeah, every time I watch it, I find something new and interesting that I didn't see before. And certainly, this is a movie that is sort of jam packed of weird, messy, strange choices. And it's
Oh,
great.
but like I think all the choices that were made in this movie though serve a purpose. Like
Hmm.
everything just I mean if you so we say view it as a comedy, but the key thing is also satire. Like it is
Yes.
just
Yeah, yeah,
dripping with satire of the American dream and colonialism, and the whole theme is manifest destiny and going out and just consuming everything around you as you expand and
consuming
eat to
ravenously.
live and then live to eat.
Yes,
Um
yes,
and so like there's so many things that are just thrown into this movie that are just tiny little details that kind of build on that. One thing that I only learned just today was so the general, he's General Slauson, right? And he's the guy that at the end inadvertently eats the Knox stew. And
oh, uh-huh.
yeah,
Hmm.
so Antonia Bird, who swooped in like her namesake to save this production at the last
Right.
minute and took
Yep.
over directing,
Yep.
uh, she did not want to work in Hollywood ever again after she made a movie that had Drew Barrymore and Chris O'Donnell called Mad Love.
Uh-huh.
And well, see, first of all, Antonia Bird's background is that she was in theater, and then she did a couple of these like really dramatic, thought-provoking avant-garde films in the early '90s.
Mhm.
Including one that took on the Catholic Church in like '92, and then she
Yeah,
made
Priest.
Priest.
Priest,
Yeah.
not with Anthony Hopkins.
No,
Not with no.
and so then she makes this movie, Mad Love, and then like execs just messed it up so much that she's like, yeah, screw Hollywood, I'm done. And then she came into this project as a favor for Robert Carlyle because the
Mhm.
first director got fired, the second director everybody mutinied against, and then they needed somebody. So the reason I bring up Slauson is Slauson Avenue is one of the main streets that runs through LA and Hollywood. And so naming him Slauson, and at the end, he's going to continue on this cannibalism thing. And she has said that Los Angeles is the most cannibalistic city in the world. She's like, it exists purely to consume its own. And so that's just one example of a tiny detail that's thrown in there that adds, to the satire.
Fascinating nugget. I did not put that together at all, nor would I have in a million years. Antonia Bird, really interesting filmography. Recently deceased, unfortunately. Really liked making movies with one-word titles. You might notice, except for Mad Love, which is the
one she hated.
exception. So there you go. The one she hated was the one that wasn't one-word title. We talked a little bit about that with Logan as well, the whole mutiny thing and the Robert Carlyle connection, and that Carlyle was in Priest, and that was sort of how she got that gig. It's one of those things where when I know enough of her work and sort of the whatever this movie ended up being is so admirable that I really wish she'd have lived to do more.
So back to choices, one that also pops back in my, like I said, I have been like living and breathing nothing but Ravenous for like the last month as we've gone through these power outages and being landlocked, and like outside of the cave, when Calhoun does his like transformation into Ives and is going crazy and he's doing that panting thing, right? Did you guys pick up on? I only learned this because of Carlisle's commentary of what he's doing and what's going on there. Is that so? The night before, he licked the blood of Stouffer, who is Stouffer. He's the religious guy, right? And he's writing a hymn, which Calhoun helps him with the hymn, right?
Yeah.
And then he like licks his blood. Well, the idea is that
Toffler.
That's it. Yeah. The Wendigo curse. You absorb the person's strength and essence as you eat them, right? When he is making those panting noises, he's actually panting in rhythm. He is doing the hymn that Toffler was writing the night before to his face. He is mocking him and somewhat becoming him. And that's why he's acting all cowardly too, because Toffler is really cowardly. That adds a whole nother level to it. And then they filmed it that way. And then when it came time to do the score, Damon Albarn picked up on that and like leaned into it and made that an aspect of that whole scene. And it's just an acting choice that was done. It wasn't like direct discussed with Antonia Bird. It was just something that Carlyle made up in the spot. He's like, this is what I'm going to do. And it's just a choice that seems really absurd and bizarre. But then when you realize the logic behind it and how it fits into the world of the movie, it's just genius.
That's that's why I gotta rewatch it, because that's something I would not pick up on. I love Damon Albarn. I'm a giant Blur fan, and I've loved everything he's ever done in his life. And this is the only movie he ever scored, which is kind of
that's
wild
amazing
to think about.
Wow.
But he's done a lot of other stuff, but
sure,
he keeps himself busy for sure. But this was his only foray into film scoring. But what a really interesting combination of ideas that nobody's going to notice, and unless you watch it a million times, and there's only a handful of people who have or would do that.
I feel like this is similar to Jawbreaker, which we just did, where it's like it's trying a bunch of things and not everything is working, but a lot of it is working, and a lot of it is working with each other, but some of it's not working with each other. And I think I said this at the beginning of this season or module or whatever we're calling it, where I feel like, the first 2 seasons of the show, we did like, with some exceptions, but we did like unequivocally like great movies, right? Like there were a couple like big swings and misses that we did not like. But this one's really interesting because I feel like this season is things that people are passionate about or that they care about or are really just interesting. And like, I like that they don't just work. Like there's as good as like The Sixth Sense is, it's just like, yeah, it's a really good movie. Like, what are we going to say about it? But like here, it's just like, oh no, like this is messy. Like this isn't, like some of it's not good. Like some of it just like, it just doesn't gel. And I feel like
I disagree.
It's interesting. Well, I mean, I'm glad that you do. But I just think that like, there's some of it that's just like, it's bizarre, or like it's doing things, it's trying things that like other movies
It is very experimental.
don't or haven't.
The
It
the
is.
things you would expect, like even having seen it with no expectation of what it was going to be, I was trying to guess the genre of the movie for the first half of it, and I love that. Like I actually,
There isn't one.
that was a big plus for me, and I don't mind. I guess I really enjoyed it for its messiness. And I liked that I didn't know what to expect, and it kind of carried through. Toward the end, you kind of got where it was going, and that was fine. But yeah, I guess I see all those as a positive. But I completely agree with you that it doesn't quite work, and that like makes it better. I guess because it's.
And I also,
I don't know. I don't know. How do I say
I
this?
would rather have ambition. I would rather have something try a thing than like something that's not.
Yeah.
So like
original.
I'm not really saying that as a negative. I'm just saying that like there's only so many good things you can say about like good movies. It's like, yeah, there's nothing interesting that like when we all love a movie, but when there's something that's just like, oh no, like this is not what I think of when I think of X, Y, or Z, or like I don't know how like the pacing is weird, or this, or like unexpected.
Yes.
Maybe weird is the wrong word. I think that there's something worth exploring, even if you don't like horror movies. I think you could probably watch maybe not a lot of it, you know, not all of it, because some of it's really gross. But I feel like you could like explore and be like, oh, this is something different than what I was expecting when you're like, you know, a Western horror movie or something, whatever, however you want to describe it.
I think also maybe I don't know if this is same for you, Garth, but I know it hits different for me in that it's set in California. It's based loosely on the Donner Party, and that's, you know, it's our state. But more than that, I used to spend my summers at my grandparents' home, which is 30 miles as the crow flies from the Donner Party camp.
Oh wow!
So I spent my summers up in the High Sierra, and so that kind of like gives me more of a connection or an investment in the story. Except I did recognize they were not really in the Sierras.
Yeah, they filmed somewhere else in the world completely, right? They filmed in like.
And the reason I knew
all the Sierras, and that
is not the Sierras.
I was like, there's no cedars, there's no ponderosa pines. You know, that's not the Sierras. It's close.
Well, to your question, Cody, I think actually I would say so. In any kind of frontier movie, I do feel a little bit of that. You know, living in a cabin in the woods and having grown up here. Anything that sort of has characters getting used to that sort of a living is gonna hit me in a certain way where I'm like, oh, he should do this. Like I'm immediately invested, going like, what are they gonna do wrong? Or how accurate is this movie gonna be about the way things go? I guess that was probably.
Meanwhile, Julie and I are like, we would just die because we're from the East Coast. So like, you know, we have no.
And then there's a part of me that I spent about almost 9 years working as a butcher. And so I'm like, well, they're doing that all wrong. You know? That's not how you would do that, guy. Also,
so what you're saying is you have a very particular set of skills that lets you dissect this movie, pun sort of intended, in a way that no one else really is able to do.
Yeah. It just speaks to me on a certain level.
In terms of trade, in terms of location, in terms of other things you're probably hiding from us for fear of like, oh, this guy is from Ravenous.
He knows too much.
Well, I liked the score. I like the score because not only do I love Damon Albarn, but I play the banjo, and it's a minimalist score that is based around the banjo for most of it. So that also spoke to me. It's like they made this movie for me. I'm pretty sure this is for me. There's other movies that I'm like, that is not for me. This is.
They must have made it for somebody because nobody saw it when it came out.
You might have said this. I might have missed this, and I know this is gonna, you know, spoil something from the end of the episode. But like, is this your favorite movie of all time?
No.
Okay.
Not even my favorite of 99.
Oh, well, same.
Okay, well, we're going to get to that
We're
later. So hold that thought. So another thing that I want to talk to you guys about, because this is sort of up your alley, is the way the movie plays with the with sort of folklore of the, well, however you want to pronounce it, Wendigo or Wendigo or Wetico
or Wendigo, as they keep saying,
or Wendigo, or wherever you are, if you're a Plains Indian or Great Lakes, or it's pronounced differently in different places, but it's basically always the same concept, which is the idea of of kind of a zombie force that feeds not off of flesh but off of life, which I think is a really, you know, when the colonialists came, was a useful metaphor, and this digs really heavily into it. What do you make as an anthropologist of the way that they employed that idea and sort of gave it a kind of
this
a
move
spin?
well yeah so if people want more in-depth discussion on this, more so that I'm going to go over here,
Yeah.
go and listen to our episode on indigenous shapeshifters, because we have an actual expert who speaks on this.
It's a really good episode, by the way. I can vouch for
Thanks.
that. I have
Oh,
listened to
thank
that
you.
one. Yeah.
Well, I have not, so don't get too excited.
Joey will reserve
I
judgment until he's listened to
refuse
it.
to listen to any podcast from any guest on this show.
As our expert Josh in that episode explained to us, that the idea of the Wendigo is really more of an allegorical explanation for the dangers of starvation in the wintertime. And so it is more common in the areas where you have colder climate. It's the winters are harsher, and so this is just this like kind of warning tale about, like, if you're not prepared, like, it'll devour you. Like, the spirit of winter will then absorb you, and you become this hungry beast. In that sense, this movie is probably one of the more accurate depictions. It takes some liberties. I mean, I don't think the original belief talks about superhuman regeneration or absorbing the strength and stuff like that. But the idea that it is this insatiable hunger that can be contracted almost like a disease, um, is there's a whole nother satirical level in the movie that builds off that too, about
Yeah.
this idea of this contagious disease, and it being treated almost like an addiction. I think Antonia Bird told Guy Pearce to play it as if you're a junkie in withdrawal, and that's why he's resisting. He really doesn't want to, and then Ives is the personification of that fix that he needs. He even like taunts him with it, when he cuts his hand and smell the blood and kind of thing. But all in all, yeah, it's a pretty good Wendigo movie, I would say. I mean, there's no, he's not some inhuman beast with antlers and stuff. In most traditional art of the Wendigo, it's just depicted as a very emaciated person, maybe with
Yeah.
some wild hair, and but yeah, it's just this personification of starvation and what you would do to stave off that.
You know what? One thing that I don't think we've really talked about that I think is really interesting about this movie is that it sets the hero up, or at least the main character, I don't know if he's a hero, as a coward.
Mhm.
Like, I think that also plays into the whole, like, wanting a fix, because he's not somebody you would necessarily root for. Like, his Medal of Honor, Medal of Valor is because, like, he got scared and he hid, and like he
Right.
like let his
Yeah.
whole troop sort of die, right? Like, I feel like it sets like I think the movie starts with him like receiving this award. You're like, oh my god, like look at this guy, and you're like, oh wait, no, he doesn't
Mhm.
deserve. And his captain's just like, get out. Like, I know what happened, get out.
Mhm.
And I think there's something really interesting about the whole, like, if you're talking about the drug addict element of it, but also compounded with just like the kind of guy that you're not really rooting for. I think that there's a lot going on, and he's a layered central character in a way that, like, I think a lot of horror central characters are sort of ciphers, like, for the audience. We're just
Right.
like, oh, like, they're you, like, you're in the house
Mhm.
alone, like, aren't you scared? But this is just like, no, this is a guy who, like, has stuff going on in his life, and I think it's interesting in a way that other movies, especially other horror movies, sort of don't try to do. Again, just this thing that they're trying to do here that other movies just really aren't
Yeah.
interested in exploring.
Yeah, he's much more of a relatable character, or more human. He's a more human character that in a story that involves superhuman feats
Yeah.
and suit
Yeah.
almost borderline magic. Yeah, I mean, like, how many of us, we all like to think that we'd be some action hero in a war situation, but most of us probably would seize up and just play dead. Although, notice how, like, yes, what he did was cowardly, but like in other situations, people would say that, like, oh, you saw that you were obviously losing, and so you faked dead to sneak in, which is what they give him like the medal for.
Hmm.
That is kind of good tactics. It's like, that's actually a cunning plan. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, the
that's
fact
true.
that he did it purely out of self-preservation, but he also feels guilt about it. He doesn't think he just thinks he doesn't feel he deserves that medal. Um,
Right.
and it's unfortunate they cut a lot, even after the movie was done. The executives got their hands on it and cut some scenes, which are on the DVD. they go much more in depth into the reasons for why each person's at Fort Spencer. Like, you don't get the full story, and the idea is that that's where they stick everybody who's a fuck up.
Do you find out about David Arquette, where he came from?
He's a fuck up. It's David Arquette. What do you think? I mean, like, that's his role. That's what
Yeah,
he
I know,
plays.
but I want to hear. I want that character's backstory.
You got it from looking at David Arquette.
Yeah, that's all you needed.
Well, I mean, you do gather it through context, but they actually had scenes where there was dialogue and exposition of backstory. Like the soldier, Cleves. No, wait, Cleves is David Arquette. Anyway, the soldier guy, the one who I always forget this actor's name, but I always think of him as color desaturated Gary Sinise. His whole thing is he's sent there because he is so overzealous that he started like shooting people in his own group for attempting to desert or surrender. And so he can't stand cowardice. And so that whole scene of him like at gunpoint forcing Guy Pearce to chase down Calhoun through the woods bears a little more weight. But then also he despises cowardice. He's the person that Boyd has to eat to regain his strength. He absorbs that courage. Right. And from that point on, he still hasn't completely crossed the line. Like, he has the strength to come back, and it's not until he gives in and eats Knox. Maybe it gives him the courage to, give in to the temptation. And then from that point on, it's, he's going to kill Calhoun / Ives.
Yeah, the actor you're thinking of is Neil McDonough, who is mostly just his eyes.
With his big, dumb baby head, as described and justified.
Yeah. I also wanted... So what you just kind of said there, Cody, about the things that were cut, and what we said earlier about the sort of the way this movie is very sort of weird and experimental. One of the things that is, as we're doing this podcast about this year, there's a lot of reasons why this year is interesting, and one of them is that we start to see the transition away from movies like this being made and being in cinemas, right? You would never see a movie like this in a theatrical release today. There's a bunch of movies that we've talked about that today just like would not see the light of day in a theater. Maybe would see the light of day in some other capacity, but not sort of a mainstream release.
You wouldn't see a movie like this, but also I don't think we would have seen a movie like Swiss Army Man in 1999. So
that's true.
I think tastes just shift.
Yeah, that's true. But there's also another one that I've talked about in my other podcast before that we'll get to eventually on this podcast is Stigmata, where it's like it came out, it was number one when it came out, and it's just like this kind of movie just doesn't get fucking made today. Sometimes for good reasons, right? Like, it's not a great movie. But what I think is interesting here is that you have that sort of conflation of a kind of movie that is very weird and experimental, and it's very difficult to sell, and it's hard to pin down a genre, and it doesn't get made today. At the same time, you have a movie that still studio execs were like, well, we're cutting that, and we're going to cut that, and we're going to cut that, and here's what you're going to have at the end. And so I think part of the way this movie kind of feels disjointed sometimes probably is a result less of the vision of the movie, but more of what they could actually finally get into a movie theater, because you didn't have streaming options. You didn't have let's put this on Netflix or Amazon Prime or something, which is probably what would happen to it today.
Cody, I have a question for you. You were saying this before, and this goes right to what John was saying. Is there only one cut of this available? Like, you said that there's deleted scenes and stuff, but is there an Antonia Bird version?
Not that I'm aware of.
There's just the one. Okay.
And she even says in the commentary, there's a shot that she wanted to do, and they tried to do at the end, that was in it when she turned it in, and then it got cut, and it's not even on the DVD, which is at the very ending of the movie. The camera is supposed to pan up from them in the bear trap, and then it rises through the ceiling and just goes up into this, and you get this big panoramic shot of the wilderness. And then the music is supposed to swell. And her idea was that was supposed to symbolically represent Boyd breaking free of the curse and finally getting his peaceful rest after this whole ordeal of also being a coward. And his hero's journey, as it were, even though he's not really a hero, is complete in that moment. Because the whole thing was you had to give of yourself to break the curse. All the Wendigo does is it takes, it never gives. Also, can we talk real quick about the character of Martha in this movie?
Is that the one woman in this movie?
The only woman in this movie.
Yes. Exists in this
the
world.
one woman in this movie. Yeah. But I just think that at the end, I love that she knows what's going on, like, completely.
Yes.
She looks
Right.
in, she sees them in the bear trap, and then she just nopes the
Yep,
fuck
nope.
out of there,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I
Love
thought
it.
was great because
Smart.
it's just like she's choosing to break the cycle. She's like, I'm not gonna and I think that's an important lesson for all of us is that, you have the option to just not participate in these cycles of Wendigo cannibalism, metaphorically, whatever it is, the cycle
Yeah.
of violence or the cycle of history repeating itself. You could be Martha and just say, fuck no, and just get out.
John, I feel like we have new merch for this episode. It's got to just be like Martha.
In a world of cannibals, be like
In a world of
Martha.
Carlisles, be like Martha.
I also like that there's the joke of there's a joke scene where based around her, which is when like everybody is gone except for Ives, Knox, Boyd, who's in custody, and her. Knox goes to her and gives this like statement as if he's talking to multiple people. He's like, yeah, we need to take him to a prison. We need somebody to go on foot to get reinforcements. Any volunteers? And she just sarcastically like raises her hand. It's like, yeah, because there is no one else. He's such a fucking alcoholic. Like, what does he think he's doing?
Right.
Just another interesting choice of visible sarcasm in an otherwise bleak situation.
What it sounds like is a work though. Like his plea worked, right? He got a volunteer. So
yeah,
who's laughing now? I mean, they're all dead now, but
not Martha.
Not Martha.
Well, there is something kind of like tragic though about that idea of Martha kind of walking away and being like, fuck all of this. In that when you look at the movie as an allegory for Western colonialism and manifest destiny and all that sort of thing, it's like, well, it's still coming for you and it's still going to get you because, this is an unquenchable beast that is going to devour everything in its path. And you can walk away, but you are going to, fall into it eventually.
Yeah, and as the indigenous representation in the film, that carries an extra level to it as well. Is that she's choosing not to participate, but that means that doesn't mean you're not going to get dragged in. Exactly.
Right. Well, the only other indigenous character dies early, trying to be heroic, right? If I remember how his death pans out. A lot of people die early in this movie, which is a really interesting choice for a movie like this. You're not left with a ton of cast. I mean, again, the Jeffrey Jones plot twist aside, people die real soon. And, like, major actors are dispensed of pretty quickly, which is always when you're making a horror movie, is always a tricky tightrope to walk.
But it still happens faster than it would in a normal horror movie, right? Like a quote unquote normal horror movie. It's like, because I was joking in the intro about like, this is your favorite type of movie because it has character actors, it has character actors, it has character actors, and it's just like you get there, you're like, oh my god, like I love all of these actors. They're all so good and weird and specific, and you're like, oh, they were here for like 12 minutes, and now they're all dead. So, thanks for the tease.
But every single one of those character actors does a great job of developing their character for the time you get. Like they're they are fully formed characters, every single 100%. One of them, and that really, just helps make this movie so great.
Yeah, I alluded to that, and again, it was something we kind of talked a little bit about in the intro, is that one of the things that makes this movie work insofar as it does is that I may not know what they're doing. I may not quite know what kind of movie this is supposed to be. Every single actor seems to. And the movie works because not only are they all completely all in, but they all seem to be understanding the assignment in a way that I'm like, okay, cool. Good for you all. And it's a great assortment of actors. And again, Cody, you're right that even like Jeremy Davies, sort of who he is very, very, it's part of him as an actor that he's able to embody roles like that so effortlessly. And then, John Spencer, who's like, doesn't die early on, but he's barely around until the end. And then, you're right. It's the sort of movie where you could cast sort of stand-ins for characters like this, but it wouldn't work as well because you need the gravitas of really established, well-known and accomplished actors to fill in those gaps and sort of let you know what these characters are, because they're not going to be around for very long because it's a cannibalism movie. So
and what a movie. It's great. I just can't, I just got to recommend it to everybody. Just go watch Ravenous. You got to see it at least once. I was thinking as we're talking about this, that talking about how the tone keeps kind of jumping around. And I think, so 2 of my favorite bands are They Might Be Giants and Ween. 2 bands that are not constricted by genre. And like every album of theirs you listen to, the songs vary, and even when I was in a band, we kind of tried to take the same idea of like, we don't limit ourselves to genre. We do what the song needs. So the song, this song just has to be a reggae jam, and this song just has to be this. And I think that might be part of how this movie was made, is what does this particular scene need to be?
Yes.
And it's
Because
patchwork
some
quilt.
scenes are like Last of the Mohicans, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then some scenes you're like, wow, this is a weird, like Tarantino-esque Western comedy.
Especially like around the cave, where like they build to this tension. It's building. You've got Robert Kyle going crazy and panting like a dog and digging in the dirt. And then the murders start happening, and it's extremely tense. And then he points the gun and click, and nothing happens. And it resolves on a joke of, that's so annoying. And then suddenly it goes into this like hootenanny hollering, banjo tune of like complete with somebody going wee. I mean, it kind of sounds a little bit like Primus for a second.
Yes,
and the tone,
I thought that a few times. Yeah,
and so it's like he's in a completely different movie than the other people at this point who are chasing him. But yeah, it's all about, what does this scene need? Does this scene need to be funny? Does this scene need to be scary? And just play it to that. And then, hopefully the quilt that's done at the end keeps you warm.
Well put.
Or at least it looks like a cool quilt.
Yeah.
I don't think this could be complete without a little bit of Guy Pearce appreciation hour.
Oh, yeah.
So first question for you guys. Garth, let me tell me what you think about this. Is Guy Pearce the ugliest handsome man on earth, or the handsomest ugly man on earth?
What the fuck? That's a terrible question. That dude's just really
it's
good.
It's okay. He's rich. We're punching up.
I don't know when I see his face.
No. I just disagree with the premise.
He's so weird looking, Joey. He's weird looking.
I just saw the movie with him, and I just pulled him up on a search image, and I'm looking at a bunch of pictures of him, and I can't even figure out where I would fall on that. He looks incredibly different in every picture. I think he's a perfect actor. So I think it's very contextual whether or not he's a good looking guy, and that's kind of what you want. Yeah. I'm gonna abstain from the question just because I'll be limiting him if I come down hard on one side or the other.
I guess the thing is, ideally you want an actor who can disappear into any role.
That's this guy.
And if he is hard to place, then he could, he's halfway between. He's kind of like Silly Putty, just this.
I'm just thinking, when I picture my residual in the Matrix, and my residual Pierce image is Memento, and I think
holy
it's like,
shit, was he the guy in? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just noticed that he was in Memento. I did not recognize him.
Yeah, he's
I was going through all these photos
of
movies he was in, and right as you said that, I saw that he was in Memento. I was like, no way, that was him.
So I think, in Memento, I think he's unequivocally handsome.
Oh, sure,
I think he's just a good-looking dude in that movie. And that's what I think of when I think of, he's, this is the 1800s. Like, everybody looks ugly in this because there's no hygiene in the 1800s, right? So, don't judge him on this, lest ye be judged in your, post-apocalyptic, I need to eat a person to survive.
I think what makes him so intriguing as an actor, though, is that there is he's a weird looking guy who also just is very able to present incredible. It's very strange. I don't know how he does it.
He's memorable, but in a forgettable way. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
For example, as soon as Garth realized he was Memento, he's like, "Of course he's the guy in Memento. How did I not remember that?"
That's
because it's Guy Pearce.
Yeah, I think a really good looking actor needs to also look a little funny. And that's a thing about expressions and about just being able to emote. So you get that kind of higher thing, and I think he fits that perfectly. And yet he's also forgettable. He doesn't have the face where it's like, oh, it's always this guy playing a different part. He's not like Harrison Ford in a different part. He really does blend into it, but he does have a funny looking face too. I don't know. Yeah.
He really does. I remember the first time that I was like, oh, he's actually like really weird looking was the Count of Monte Cristo, which is a pretty good movie, even though it's carried by Jim Caviezel, who's but it's good. But it's like, oh no, he's fucking really ugly. Like he's a really weird looking dude. And this was pretty much right after LA Confidential, and I was like, oh wow, that guy's really attractive, right? So yeah, I don't know. I'm fascinated
it's
by
called
his
acting, John. It's called acting.
It's not just acting. It's something about his jaw that is very weird. I don't know what it is, but there's something about it. But
jocting.
I'm a giant Guy Pearce stan, all the same. Yeah, and also I want to like, so I think it's really interesting if we sort of take this snapshot of Guy Pearce's career. This is fairly early in his sort of like where he ended up going as an actor in Hollywood. I think obviously Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe had done things prior to LA Confidential, but that was when they both really hit the American audience. And Russell Crowe's career went one direction and Guy Pearce's went the other direction, like a different direction, right? So Russell Crowe was like blockbuster star for quite some time. Guy Pearce started doing like movies like this. And I love Russell Crowe, don't get me wrong, as an actor. I think he's one of the greatest actors of his generation, but I love what Guy Pearce's career has been. And whenever I see him, whenever he pops up, I'm like, good choice. I like this. Like this is a really weird and cool and interesting choice for you to make, and he makes everything that he does. He does.
Do you like that just because of his range? Like he can do so many different types of characters, like a character actor kind of a thing, or what is it about him?
I don't know, Joe. I want to know what you think about Guy Pearce too. But like, to me, it's his. Again, it's the fact that he's a little ugly, and that he has this real like well of depth to his face that I don't know. He just brings so much sort of life into every role that he plays. But he's a very generous actor as well. Like he doesn't have to be the lead man, and he often isn't. And he also just like really makes everybody around him better. Like one of the things I think that really works about this movie and sort of makes it somewhat a cult legend is the story of the cast and having their insurrection against the original director. And that this is all, it's a cast of actors who are like, I want this movie to work and I want everybody to succeed here, and it's not going to in its current format. And like that has some staying power with me, I think. Anyway, Joey, what do you think about Guy Pearce?
I think he's great. I think between him and Russell Crowe is my favorite movie that either of them have done in The Nice Guys. But that's mostly for Gosling. That's not necessarily for Russell Crowe. But I think Guy Pearce is interesting. I mean, Guy Pearce did Lockout, which is a great movie. I don't know if you guys have seen Lockout, but it's space,
fantastic.
Prison, fucking rules.
No, I hadn't.
But I think Guy Pearce is just like, he does interesting things. I think it's kind of like Ravenous, where just like you might not always like it, but it's a new flavor. Oh, that's such a bad pun. That wasn't. I did not mean to start. I did not mean to wind up there. But like he does movies like The Rover, which rules. Results is great. Animal Kingdom is great. Like The Hurt Locker, Iron Man 3 he's good in. Like all these movies, like I really like him. And Russell Crowe. Okay. To parallel it to another thing, I don't know if this comparison directly makes sense, but when we did a few years ago, we did the Tom Club. Me and Mike did Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks, and Tom Cruise. This doesn't quite match up. But like Tom Hanks is just like, yeah, he's good. We get it. Like I understand. It's boring. He's good. I understand. It's done. End of story. Like that's Russell Crowe, kind of just like, yeah, Gladiator's great. Yeah, like all these like whatever. But I feel like with Tom Cruise, it's like, ooh, there's going to be something different and weird here. And then it gets into just the, the Mission Impossible movies or whatever, which are all perfect. But like, I think that like there's something, if again, we're comparing the two, which I don't know that we are anymore, other than I keep saying it. I think that Guy Pearce is just like willing to take chances and risks and like do more indie shit that's taking swings at things throughout his career, not just like over like, over the course of decades.
Maybe the difference there is like you could be the best actor ever, but it doesn't necessarily make you the most surprising or interesting or ready to take risks. And seeing someone who's willing to do a really weird role in a really weird movie is going to bring results that you can't expect. And the best actor in the world might not do that. So it's like different criteria. It's like you could be a good actor in one way or a original actor in another, I guess. I don't know.
if you're gonna be the most forgettably rememberable and the ugliest handsome man there is, you have to take risks in your acting choices. It's the only way. You have to swing big, because otherwise you're just not going to stick around in people's minds. Maybe, I don't know. Also, I think it's fitting that his name is just Guy.
Like a Galaxy Quest. I don't have a name.
Yeah.
Another real quick thing, I think we also need to now do the Robert Carlyle Appreciation Hour.
Yes.
So Robert Carlyle, who I joked is the guy that you get when you can't get Gary Oldman in the intro, which is a little true, but also he's amazing. And one of the things I hadn't really thought about, Cody, until you kind of started bringing it up, is that one of the things that makes Robert Carlyle great is that he's kind of like David Tennant, where he can have a really massive screen presence, but is tiny. And he can both be this like terrifying, imposing figure, but also someone who's emaciated at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of why this character works, right? Where it's like, you can see that he's like starving, and terrifying, but also deeply like just imposing and huge. And that's not something you can teach in acting school, kids.
Robert Carlyle, he has his own commentary track on the movie that's just him. And
okay, I got to see that.
Yeah, and he like concocted an entire life story for Calhoun / Ives, and used that to like build every decision he made. He has that rosary that is you see when he starts out as Calhoun, and then also again when he is Colonel Ives, he still has that same rosary. If you watch when he's telling the story about making the trip in the wagon over, that rosary actually belongs to the woman in the group that he killed and ate. And then he just like took one of her items and then just like, it's like a trophy that he has. And also
that's some serial killer shit.
And he's posing as a minister, but he might have actually been a minister at some point, according to Carlyle. Because that's the thing in the movie is we don't know, was he really Calhoun or was he really Ives?
Right.
They never really give you a definitive answer on that.
Yeah, I mean, when he shows up, he just makes things better. I mean, Begbie in Trainspotting is fucking incredible. Full Monty, fucking incredible. When he was in 24, when he plays John Lennon in Yesterday, like everything is just, it's that guy. Everything he touches, terrific.
When he first showed up in this movie, I only recognized him from both Trainspotting and The Full Monty, so I was like, well, it's gonna go one way or the other. But this, and it took me a little while,
but then it went both,
and it did. And it took me a little while to recognize it. When I did, I was like, oh, Trainspot, oh, The Full Monty. All right, what's gonna happen to this character?
You get the full Carlyle.
Yeah, that was it. Both sides.
Full Carlyle.
No, a superb actor. And this movie is cast so, again, I kind of said this before, but it's so immaculately cast. And it's like one of the things that, if that were not the case, I don't know we'd be talking about it, right? Like there's so many, it's so weird and so cultish that like that I think puts it into a different level. And
so many different ingredients, so many great tastes that taste great together.
It's really a stew of humans who are just perfect together.
A nourishing stew
of humanity that really makes you feel empowered in some interesting ways. So great, interesting movie. Go see it if you have not seen it already.
And it's streaming on the Criterion Channel. So if you are one of the like
nice.
11 people who streams for Criterion Channel, I have it because of course I do. You can stream it for free there, or you can probably pay to rent it wherever. But
that's like $4 on Amazon or something. So but everybody's got the Criterion Channel. So what am I even saying?
I got the DVD.
If you're listening to a podcast called 1999 the Podcast, there's a better chance than average that you have the Criterion Channel as someone who has access to the Criterion Channel, or
that you've seen this movie at some point.
Until recently, wasn't the Criterion Channel included with HBO Max?
Ooh. No, they have a bunch of movies on there. They like when HBO Max launched, they launched with a bunch of titles, but the Criterion Channel is actually, of all the streamers, I feel like it does the best job in terms of curation, in terms of like cycling through and rotating through stuff like on a monthly basis. Like they really surprise, surprise, they seem to care about movies in a way that other streaming companies don't. And they do a really nice job of collections. Like this was in like the snowy Western or something, or like snowy, like there's like a very specific, but like
Nice.
somehow uncovered like 20 different movies.
I'm curious what other movies
like
were
they're
in
really
this.
good at what they do over there.
What other movies were in this genre? Because it was so weird. I mean, Dead
gonna
Man,
look it up.
maybe? I don't know. Like it's like an acid
Like
western
the
a little
Hateful
bit.
Eight,
Sure, the
right?
Hateful Eight would totally.
Yeah,
Dead Man.
I think you see it listed alongside Bone Tomahawk.
Okay, yeah.
But I think just because it's Western and gory and has cannibals.
Only one of those movies bisects a man in half with a tomahawk, though.
True.
Which one?
I won't say.
I can't tell from any titles. So.
Oh, okay. Here we go. It's called Snow Westerns. We've got The Secret of Convict Lake, The Wild North, The Far Country, The Great Silence, Ride the High Country, Day of the Outlaw, Track of the Cat, Little Big Man, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Dead Man, and Ravenous.
Nice.
It's a pretty solid array.
Yeah.
Of a very specific thing. Snow
Dead Man is a great movie.
I love Dead Man.
Even though I'm not a fond of its star anymore. But anyway, that's a completely different conversation that we're not going to have. Let's move on to our final round of questions. Joey has a couple locked in. Cody, we've already alluded to this. I'm very excited to find out what the real answer is.
I'm going to build the suspense a little bit more. I'm going to hold off on Cody. We're going to go to Garth first. Garth.
Okay, I'm ready.
What is, I know that we know that this question is wildly difficult. So you can just, if you have like a go-to answer, even if it's not the real answer, that's fine. What is your favorite movie of all time?
Of all time? Oh, well, so my go-to answer for so many years that it's sort of set in stone is probably The Big Lebowski. Okay. But I mean it's one of those things that catches you at a certain age and doesn't let go. So I don't know if it would be if I saw it for the first time now, but like anything that is your favorite, it hit you at the right time. And I would say that about most things that are my favorite anything.
Now, with a name like Garth, do you love or hate Wayne's World?
I actually do love Wayne's World. Yes, big fan.
Okay,
yeah.
Now, do you have a favorite movie of 1999?
Now this one I knew you were going to ask, so I thought about it a little bit, and I looked it up to make sure it was 1999. And this again falls into the asterisk of my first answer, which is it's not the best movie of 1999, but my favorite because it was the right place at the right time was Dogma.
Really?
I really like Dogma. Love Dogma.
Interesting.
Wow.
I was born in. I was looking at the numbers. I was born in '87, so I would have been 12, and I was just getting into Kevin Smith when I was like, and I was like, I think like 11 when I was getting into Kevin Smith, which is kind of young, and like I saw like Clerks, and I was getting introduced to this whole thing. Then Dogma came out, and I saw it in theaters, and it was like, that's the one. But yeah, no, I mean, impressive movies. I mean, Matrix was great.
I never heard of it.
Oh, no? Okay. I think they might have made a sequel or two.
Never heard of that.
Or three. Cody, you teased it earlier.
Uh-huh.
What is your favorite movie of all time?
Okay, well, favorite movie of all time is really hard. I'm inclined to kind of initially I could say like Garth, Big Lebowski, but I am a card-carrying ordained priest in the Church of the Latter-day Dude. I've actually performed weddings in the official capacity. So I mean that's a movie I can watch without getting sick of it. I can always watch it. I don't know if I have an ultimately actual favorite movie. I have probably like a handful of movies that I could watch over and over again and not get sick of them.
Sure.
It depends on mood, what do I need it for? But
okay, so here's a question.
Yeah.
As like a media fan, a movie fan, you were without power for 74 years. When power was restored, was there a movie in that stretch you're like, I really wish I could, like this is the one I want right now, the comfort food? Is there a movie either like when power came back, you're like, and I don't know if I would have an answer to that, but yeah.
This actually ties into favorite of 99 in a way.
Hold on before you get there.
Ooh.
But okay, go ahead. I have
it kind of does
question,
tie in.
Unrelated question, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, because there is a movie that is it's a contender for my favorite movie, and it might be a contender for favorite of 99, but that has a condition, which is the movie actually was produced and originally released in 97, but the American dub of it, which is what I first encountered, came out in 99, in which case it has to be Princess Mononoke.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
it's a
Nice.
beautiful movie. The score is great. The translation written by Neil Gaiman, who's one of my favorite authors, is excellent. The voice cast is great. I live in a temperate rainforest amongst the redwoods, so again, I have this connection to it when I see those shots of the forest and stuff. So it just really does speak to me. Although I was inclined to say my favorite movie of '99, and this is also a hot take, The 13th Warrior.
Wow.
I knew that was going to get a reaction.
That is an interesting one. That is on my radar. It's on
it's
my
not a good
list of
movie.
things.
It's not good.
Oh, no. But I also
But I
think
love
it's one of
it.
those things that like probably is better than initial response gave it credit for.
And most of it's just because I have my brother and I watched it a bunch at a certain time in our life, and so we have a connection and a bunch of inside jokes that are based around it. So it just has a special place in my heart.
I am looking forward to revisiting that one.
It made Omar Sharif quit acting.
Well, that and lung cancer.
Well, yeah, but he specifically cited that this movie is why he quit acting. He said it was so bad, and he's only in it for like 10 minutes. So I think he's a crybaby.
I have one more question because I asked Garth about his name. Cody, what do you think of the cinematic masterpiece starring Frankie Muniz?
Oh, Secret Agent Cody Banks?
Cody Banks.
Yeah. That fucking movie.
Is he the most famous cinematic Cody? I can't think of another cinematic Cody.
Here's the thing: is I'm actually named after the town of Cody, Wyoming, which is actually named after the very problematic and awful historical figure of Buffalo Bill Cody.
Buffalo Bill Cody, yeah. Yep.
And so that's like the most famous Cody that I would always associate it with. And then that movie came out, and the fact that my name is Cody Franks and he is Cody Banks. Yeah, that movie, I never saw it myself, but people just really liked to throw that at me to the point where, no joke, 2004, I was in New Zealand and somebody saw my name on my passport, my ID, and they go, "Oh, you must really like that movie, Agent Cody Banks." And I'm like, motherfucker, I went to a different hemisphere and it's still here.
Well, I will say that my last name is Lewandowski, which is so close to Lebowski that people are like, "Oh, you must love that movie." I'm like, I love that movie. I kind of don't. Like, it's part of it's because of people like you asking me this goddamn question every single day. So I get it.
This is why I never got into Garth Brooks. Same kind of thing. Like, I just never tried to hear him. I don't want to.
I don't know how to avoid people named John, so like whatever. I don't have that problem. Though Garth, my last name is Brooks, so together
there you
go.
Yes,
multi.
We are.
I have to say though that
well, do you like Garth Brooks then?
I don't hate Garth Brooks. I don't like country
I don't either. I've just
general,
never heard of.
But Garth Brooks is kind of cool.
I don't know, man.
Like, whatever.
Thunder Rolls is a pretty good song.
Yeah, I like that.
I have to say that Garth's name is part of the reason why I wanted to host a podcast with him so bad, is because ever since Wayne's World, I just really wanted to host a public access equivalent show with a co-host named Garth.
And here you thought he actually valued you for your opinion and your personality. It's just your name, man.
No, that was only a small deciding factor.
Podcasting is the public access television of the 21st century.
Of course.
So it is.
All right, we're gonna call it a night, guys. I'm glad we were finally able to do this. I'm also glad that like you finally got to go on someone else's podcast, because I know that's
thank you so much.
Sometime, so
it has been. Thank you so much for letting us on. It was really fun.
Yeah, our pleasure. Where can people find you and your program?
Well, we're on I think all the podcast podcatchers or whatever you want to call them, all the podcast services. We tried to get off of Spotify, but I just found out recently that I guess we're still on there.
We're totally still on there. I don't think there's anything we can do about
fault.
it.
But as far as social media, we have a Tumblr. We do show notes and articles on there. And then right now we have a extremely active Discord community going on right now. Right now we're doing a secret coded message Da Vinci Code style treasure hunt right now that everybody is taking part in. The clues are hidden in past episodes and all over the place. So if that's something you want to get in on, join our Discord and catch up on the game.
I wasn't laughing at that. I was just laughing at the idea that I've talked about the Da Vinci Code with John for like 5 or 6 hours across different Tom Hanks podcasts, and I hate those books and those movies now. So.
Oh no, me too. I just had to reach out there and say, well, what's an equivalent thing that people would know from pop culture for a bunch of coded messages and ciphers, other than maybe like
you could say National Treasure.
Yeah, National Treasure, or more like
just like National Treasure. You can go on the
Discord. So that's going on. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. There was someone tweeted, I can't remember who it was, a couple weeks ago. What's like one work of popular fiction that has like made your career a living hell? And I was like, I'm in religious studies. It's the Da Vinci Code, and there's no close second.
I can see that for sure.
As I allude to in all of those Tom Hanks Da Vinci Code episodes that we did, it is been a thorn in my side for 20 fucking years, and I love a good treasure hunt. Even if it's not for the secret bloodline of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
No, it definitely isn't. We can say that.
Joey. Got anything to say?
Oh, we're at that time now. Well, wait, what's the next movie? What are we doing? Damn, I should have spent the last hour and 12 minutes coming up with a pun for this. Hang on, bear with me.
Let's hear it. It's going to be worth it.
This is happening in real time.
It's going to be worth it when it happens.
I will say, okay. This is so bad. This is why I need a little bit more power on this podcast. I need to know what we're doing next, so I don't have to come up on the spot. I will say, look out for frogs, and I will also say that our next one is a real looker.
Oh, that there you go. That was worth it.
The tagline is the battle between the good and the bad is about to get ugly. It's like, yeah, I get you. I don't like that though. I think I'm gonna love this movie. That's not making me want to see it, but I'm gonna say it's a real looker.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No.
Oh, it's good.
Joey hasn't seen most of the movies you're covering.
I've seen most of the movies. I haven't seen.
I know.
I will say that the movies, like John and I have seen thousands of movies, and like 8 of them are in common. Like we almost could not have more disparate tastes. John's like, "What do you think of this actor?" I'm like, "I've never seen any of his 800 movies." Oh, well, here's a dissertation on why all of them are perfect.
And vice versa. It's very interesting. There's a lot of movies that have been made, guys. I don't know if you know that, but there's hundreds of movies.
Dozens.
Anyway, Cody and Garth, we'll have you back sometime. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having us on.
Look out for frogs.
Look out for frogs.